So in this last section, we're going to have a look at some of the challenges that go along with managing global teams or diverse teams, we might think of them as well, and also have a think about whether a team is the right answer for the situation. So do we want to work with a team or not? So first of all, in looking at the research around managing global teams, there's a few benefits and some drawbacks. First of all, the benefits are we get this diversity of ideas. So we're thinking about a global team. Now, in your context, this might either mean you are working within an organisation that is part of a global organisation. So you might be working with people in different offices around the world. Or you might have a team where you are working together across a diverse group of different nations with people who are freelancers. So you might have your own business and then you might have a graphic designer. So in my business, I used to have a graphic designer who is in Argentina, which made it a nightmare when I wanted to talk to them because of the time difference. I was collaborating with some partners in the UK. So we had this team that was unified across the globe, but we weren't necessarily one organisation because we were working through different organisations. But depends on what your situation is. And so we get this different diversity of ideas because people bring different thinking from their own countries. They're exposed to different ideas in their own countries, and so they can bring them to the organisation. So this contributes to the limited amount of groupthink. So groupthink is the idea that the more people are alike and the more they spend time together, the more they start to think the same. We also have this increased attention on understanding other people's ideas and perspectives, just because we know that they're different. And so there's an awareness that becomes part of the everyday structure of how we work together. We start to sort of think about, oh, why are they coming at this different, perhaps, to how I am. But some of the drawbacks includes the innate thing that people prefer to be with people that are like them, means that people tend to not like team members who are different to them. And so this needs to be managed well if we're going to have an effective team at a global scale. Also, people may mistrust each other. So either because they are separated geographically, and so they just may not have that understanding that comes with working closely with somebody, or there may be differences that may lead them to feel a sense of disconnection to that person, which can breed mistrust. We can also have stereotyping that occurs, increased communication problems, and increased stress and tension. So managing a global team is quite complex. We also might have different attitudes within the team that come about as a consequence of that diversity. So we looked at one of our earlier modules at different cultural aspects in terms of, so some cultures are more collectivist oriented, others are more individualist oriented. Some cultures have a greater tolerance for ambiguity than others, etc., etc. So these things will come into play. And we also have differences in different national perceptions and preferences around things like conformity. So should you stray from the norm or adhere to the, conform to what's going on. People's perceptions of status and desire for status can differ as well. We might have differences in terms of perceptions around social loafing. So in some cultures, it's frowned upon and people really are weighed down by social loafing, whereas in other cultures, it's not so much of a big deal because it's more about the collective. And we may have different perceptions and desires related to cohesiveness. So again, in those more collectivist cultures, the desire to be in a cohesive team will be stronger than in cultures that are more individualistic in nature. And of course, we may have language differences as well, which can contribute to miscommunications and misunderstandings, and a greater need to actually work on how do we come up with a shared language and communicate well with each other. So we also want to have a bit of a think about, particularly in your context where you may be an environment where you're working in virtual teams or ad hoc teams, so teams that come to, like in a festival is a good example, where typically you'll either have a small team that sits across year to year, but then the team grows in the lead up to the festival or event, and then kind of disbands again. Or you may be working with a team of freelancers. So say if you run your own label, you might be almost a solo operator, but then you have different people that you're working collaboratively with in order to run that label. And they're not necessarily employees. They may be other contractors or freelancers, or they might be running their own business and you're collaborating with them. And so thinking about the distinction between a group and a team, sometimes we might prefer to work with a group. So an example where you're the label owner and you're just coordinating different people who are doing different tasks for you as a group. So you might be working towards a launch of an album, and so you've got somebody who's doing the recording, someone's doing the mastering, someone who's designing the artwork, you've got the band, you might have a publicist. And so these people aren't necessarily working in a coordinated way together, but they are working as a group because they have that shared goal together. And so we want to be thinking about bringing together a team where we feel that we have this synergy that can happen. So because teamwork can take more time and effort, and often it can take more resources than people working on their own, just coordinated in some way. It's also going to require us as managers to communicate a lot more, because we've got to keep everyone together and working in the same direction if they're a team. And so we want to make sure that the actual benefit of using that team, so the coordinated approach where everyone is working together, isn't going to exceed the costs in terms of time, money, energy, etc. So whether we want to use a group or a team or just do it ourselves is all going to have to be weighed up. So that closes off our discussion on teams and groups, and I'll catch you in our next module.